The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of AIHA. AIHA does not endorse any guest or the entity that they represent. On this episode of Healthier Workplaces, the importance of influencing.
This person is doing exactly what everyone else is doing. They just happen to get words caught in their hand in the cookie jar. And so if this person is doing simply what everyone else is doing in the organization, irrespective of whether it's right or wrong, how can you hold this person up as the single failure? How can you hold this person up as a bad example to learn from? That ain't fair.
As you refer to it as the whack-a-mole approach, it doesn't solve the long-term systemic problem that's happening there. All you're doing is waiting for the next individual to follow the same bad path. Welcome to the Healthier Workplaces Show. I'm Bob Krell, founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors magazine, and your host for this show from AIHA. In 2008, 3 people were injured in an industrial accident at Sandia National Laboratories. This incident galvanized Sandia to reevaluate its approach to investigating and preventing accidents. On this episode, we are joined by Brian Thompson and CJ Backlund, the individuals at Sandia that are heading up this influencer training initiative. Stay with us.
The importance of industrial hygienists and OEHS professionals has never been better recognized. Safety science experts keeping workers and communities safe. A mixture of science and application. AIHA is the association that represents these professionals and what they do. Teamwork, thinking outside the box and solving unique challenges, a winning combination for healthier workplaces and a healthier world.
Welcome, CJ and Brian. Thanks so very much for joining us this week on the Healthier Workplaces show. Eh, Very interested in the topics that we're going to be speaking about. The topic of the day is the importance of influencing and how that can actually positively affect environmental health and safety at an organization. So let's talk a little bit about I guess the importance of influencing. That your blog that was on the AIHA site and the Synergist site uh, spoke about how you both came together to create a class, and this was in the aftermath of an incident at your facility. Is that really what drove it?
So it was an accident, a serious industrial accident here at Sandia, and it happened in 2008. And a few years later, we came across this book. So we didn't create this course. The course that we teach is based upon this book, Influencer. And what it is, it's a group of social scientists, PhD social scientists have done just a ton of research into why people do what they do. And so they created this book, help you understand why people do what they do and how you can drive long-term behavioral change. And so we were really tantalized by the concept of that thing because it really got to the under the belly as far as why people do what they do. We were looking at human fallibility, human error. Why did people not follow the procedures, or why they do this instead of that? And so oftentimes, we just had our biases as far as why we think people do certain things in certain ways. This book just kind of opened our eyes to, oh my gosh, there's just a ton of other things that we need to consider. So it helps us look broader and deeper into the myriad influences that are in play behind when people do what they do. So that's what really got us excited and started teaching this class as a result of that. Excitement, as it were. We've been doing it for 12 years now.
So CJ, again, how did the two of you end up together? Putting this class together at Sandia,
Do you want me to take that one?
or is that still a Brian one? Is that still a Brian one?
This is fine. Brian was saying that he's been teaching this class for 12 years. So he really set the stage for bringing this to Sandia. And I became a certified trainer for the course around 4 or 5 years ago. and started teaching. We co-teach it now. And prior to that, I don't know, Brian, if he was teaching it alone or maybe he had somebody else that was teaching it. But it's interesting that we're both ES&H folks, and we found it to be very important. I'm sorry, I got something screwed up here. You're gonna have to tone that one out. Sorry,
That's
Bob.
okay. That's okay. We got that.
Yeah, and I think the co-teaching, I have the industrial hygiene background, and Brian has the health physics background. And so what's really valuable about that, I think, to bring it to the industrial hygiene community is the class is the class content comes from a vendor called Crucial Learning. And there are, companies all over the world actually that teach this content. But what's valuable about Brian and I teaching it, coming from one of the national laboratories, and with our environmental health and safety background, is that we put kind of that tone into the class. We have the experience. We use examples that have to do with health and safety that I think the industrial hygienist can relate to.
I guess one of the things that I took away from the article from the blog that you both authored was that often when a bad situation happens, the higher ups tend to want to point fingers and blame the individuals involved close to the incident, as opposed to looking at it in more of a, like, I guess, a holistic view. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, the pendulum has swung to both extremes over the years. Used to be that you blame the individual and you don't look any further, and then no, you blame the system. The individual is blameless, and then it's kind of gone back and forth. I think the swings have lessened in the magnitude. It's really this course and this model that is proposed by the book let you look at things holistically, look at all things included. So we look at the individual, the person closest to the pointing of the stick, the person who's been implicated in this event that had a bad outcome. We also have to take a look at the social influence. So the peer pressure, understanding full well that peer pressure did not go away when we graduated from high school. Peer pressure is alive and well in our different workplace settings. And so sometimes people just kind of lose their way. Well, if they're by themselves, they might do X, Y, Z. But dang, if I'm with somebody else's other groups, I don't want to look bad. I don't look foolish. I want to maybe be a poser so I can fit in, not get voted off the island. So I'm going to do X, Y, Z instead of A, B, C. And so we have to look at those social forces, whether it's peers or maybe direct reports, as well as from above. And so we look at from all different angles. And then we start looking at the non-human influences. You look at carrots and sticks. We look at performance reviews. You look at bonuses, things like that, or getting called on the red carpet and be given your pink slip, whatever. So, you screwed up way too many times, go away. So we look at the carrot sticks, and that might be some sort of an incentive or disincentive. Like, I'm just afraid of getting smacked in the rear end by the switch again. Also, I'm trying to grab that brass ring. I'm almost done. I'm almost there. Just one more breath. And so we have to look at those things, as well as the things within the environment, procedures, policies, tools, workplace. Do they make sense? Do they actually help get us to the end point, the desired end point, or do they get in the way? Are they out of date? Are they wrought with mistakes? And so we have to look at all those types of things that feed into why people do what they do. So that's where this really comes in handy, because it helps us look broader. So it's not just the one individual or the other pendulum swing over here. It's a system that we call a combo platter across the board. Hope that helps.
Is this approach that you're both proposing? Is this approach something that's becoming commonplace in the workplace, or is this still like a concept that maybe a lot of employers haven't embraced as of yet? I'll pitch that out to either of you.
I'll try to take that one.
And then I'll chime in afterwards.
Okay, and I guess what I would say is that I like to look at this as when health and safety professionals show up, even if they're not in a management situation, but they're showing up as leaders, because we are. You might be thinking about it along the lines of, are you a change agent? What are you trying to change? And if you want to be a change agent and move the needle towards a workplace where the probability of something occurring is lowered, you've got to get management to buy into it, and in an efficient way. And what I think is really great about a class like influencing is that you get these tools. We talk about 6 sources of influence. And if you can use all 6 of them, and Brian was talking about them a little bit, your chances of getting traction are going to be better. And if you think about in the industrial hygiene world, or anything safety for that matter, that you're trying to control, and you look at the hierarchy of controls with, say, elimination being at the top, but you're moving down into engineering controls and trying to steer your customer, I'm going to call it a customer, away from the kind of knee jerk, we're going to use PPE, personal protective equipment, then it helps you to make that case when you bring these 6 sources of influence. And we give the students an opportunity to really diagnose. Maybe it's a really deep-seated issue, like Brian was talking about. Maybe it came out of an event and you're trying to get some corrective actions in place. If you diagnose it and look for certain vital behaviors that are going to, move the needle, I used that term before, and use those 6 sources of influence, the probability of you getting the result that you want it just shoots up. I think it's more than linear.
And a follow-up to that, so, having this ability to influence and being a good influencer, is this something that some people just have an innate ability to do that? Or is it really more of a developed skill?
Do you mind if I take that one too, Brian? I
Please,
know
go
probably
for it.
wants to.
Go for it.
I think that people think it's an innate ability. From teaching this class for the number of years that I have, I believe that it's not. I think, and that's what we make the point of in the class, is that this is learned. And what you'll do in the class is go through something that we call deliberate practice. And so that you can build some muscle memory around influencing and getting some successes in influencing. In fact, we encourage students, if this feels new to them, hey, try some, maybe try some smaller goals that you want to reach that are a little bit more achievable, and use these sources of influence and see if you can get the result, and then build on that. But they do have an opportunity to do what we call deliberate practice, build the muscle memory. And I firmly believe that it is not innate, that you can learn it. I want to say one other thing, can I, about that? And it's the reason why I wanted to bring influencer to the Industrial Hygiene Conference as a PDC. I have been on the board of several local sections. And when a few years ago, I think it was in 2018, pre-pandemic, went to the leadership conference with AIHA, we did the Strengths Finder. That's what the conference was about. And what it identified was, when we looked at it, looked at the data as a large group of like 250 industrial hygienists, what we found out, and really caught my attention, is that we were low on influencing as a strength. And knowing that we were teaching this class and that it truly is not an innate ability, I thought it would be great to bring it to AIHA conference as a PDC.
I mean, that's super interesting, Brian. You had mentioned, in the article that, a lot of times environmental health and safety professionals are viewed as the safety cop. So, right, and that term, that actually, that's been my experience too in my career too. It's like, oh, Madam X, or Mr. X is here. We got to start doing things right. So it's not. How do you combat that, or counteract that type of feeling, maybe that the workforce has when they see the EH&S people there?
Yeah, Sage, you want to weigh in on that? I just have a few things. I'll connect the dots on a few things after we discuss this issue.
Oh, sure. On the safety cop, I probably find myself in that role a little bit more than Brian as an ES&H coordinator. And I think it's just really, really important that you become this trusted agent for management. And that doesn't come overnight. It takes some real work to do that. And so something I want to say about it is that we do teach the influencer class here, but it's an overlay to a number of classes that we teach. We also, Brian and I teach a class that is called the Speed of Trust class. It's how to build trust within your team. And we also teach a crucial conversations class. So these kind of all tie in together. And, we try to make that point that no, you don't want to be the safety cop. You want to be in partnership with your customer, with management.
We'll be back after this.
Meet Alice Hamilton. She was an early pioneer in what we know today as industrial hygiene. Her work had a profound impact on AIHA's earliest members. AIHA's Hamilton Club recognizes organizations that continue her work. These corporate partners use innovation and expertise to shape the future of worker health and safety. Partners receive tiered benefits of access, recognition, contribution, and brand exposure. The Hamilton Club is the center of support and investment between club partners, AIHA, and its members. This is where the future of the profession shines the brightest. For more information, visit aiha.info/Hamilton Club.
What do you think, Brian?
Absolutely. It's all about relationships. So let me go back to something that might sound and look like we're coming at this and we have two different things, there's a bifurcation, what we're talking about between what I presented earlier as far as the person closer to the pointy end of the stick and what CJ was presenting. Let me try to tie those together. When you have a bad outcome, bad event, we typically try to find out what happened. And so this helps us to diagnose the conspiracy of causes or the complex web of causes that it kind of drove to this outcome here. Specifically looking at behaviors related to the person's conduct when the bad thing happened. And then what it allows us to do is to identify with much more surgical precision what we need to change, what we need to modify, what needs to be added, or whatever the case may be, whether it's related to motivation or knowledge, skills, and abilities, or something that's a social issue, or revising procedures or policies. So it allows us to be much more precise in our corrective actions. And then this follows on. So then how do I roll these out? How do I make it more readily adopted, accepted, received by the people we're working with? So we have to influence their receptivity to the stuff to see that there's going to be a positive impact for them. Typically what I've experienced in my 40 years doing rad protection is that beyond just playing whack-a-mole with a person that is closest to the pointy end of the stick, oftentimes what happens is that the manager doesn't want to hold that one person responsible because it's kind of awkward, you get that interpersonal awkwardness. And so instead of just holding a person and trying to address their behavioral choices, this applies corrective action across the board. So one person sneezes and everyone gets a chemo. Or one person makes a mistake and everybody goes to retraining. And so there's this massive, it kills the effectiveness of those corrective actions, just breeds more and more cynicism and skepticism, and just demolishes trust that the rest of the workforce has towards their management. So that helps us identify what needs to be done specifically for this individual, and maybe look at the bigger picture, what else can be done so that's not a recurring issue. This model also helps us if we're going to work on a new program, we're going to launch a new initiative, or we have this new if we're going to roll out, and how do we get people on board with this from the get-go? And this model helps us to kind of foresee what might be some of the barriers that might prevent quick adoption, what might make it more difficult for people, what might make it feel kind of creepy for them, and helps you identify those things up front, and then work on some proven strategies to make it more readily adopted and accepted by everybody, because you're focusing on what's in it for them. The wisdom approach, you're making sure that they have the requisite knowledge, skills, and abilities to do those certain things, to behave in those certain ways, certain times. You've addressed the societal issues that might come into play, that might run counter to what we want people to do, as well as to look at those non-human type stuff. So it's that kind of an effort that makes us useful for rolling out a brand new program, and then time connect finally with CJ. We apply both those aspects, whether it's fixing a problem, addressing an issue that went wrong, or rolling out something new. Bringing this other aspect when we as ESNH professionals, as safety professionals, we're trying to understand why people aren't wearing the required PPE. Why do they keep on taking the respirator off? Find out they got a wad of chew in their mouth after they pull off a full face respirator and they spit it on the floor, then slap it back on. These unhelpful behaviors and choices. It helps us understand why they're doing that and helps us drive what can we do to make this much more common. So I don't have to be the safety cop. People know what to do. They understand why it adds value. It's the established cultural norm, and it's fast, simple, and easy. It's convenient. And so all these different things roll together to make it much more readily and easily adopted and for long-term behavioral change. So
well, as you mentioned,
connect that.
Yeah, I mean, as you were mentioning earlier, the that tendency for a knee-jerk reaction, for management to like just come in and swoop in really heavy and hard and make everybody get retrained rather than single out. Maybe if there's an individual or a few individuals that really are the cause of it. But how, is it difficult to get management to buy into this more nuanced approach?
Go ahead, CJ. You go first, and I'll weigh in.
Well, I guess what I was going to say is that, this is a journey, isn't it? And as I was saying, this is kind of an overlay to other things that we're doing here at Sandia Laboratories, revolving around management, learning how to have those kinds of conversations with the workers, and just creating what we call psychological safety. And so we're really trying to get buy-in from our management team, the non-ESNH managers, those that are performing the work, and really trying to make the case for this. And what I am finding Brian talked about being in the business for decades. I have too, is that I'm finding much more receptive management team. I think they realize that they get a good return on their investment because we can do things more efficiently. This is a way to do things more efficiently.
I mean, it's got to be challenging a little bit because as an EH&S professional, at an entity, you've got the upper management you've got to deal with. You're also dealing with the workforce. You're kind of in the middle, right? I mean, it's got to be a little bit of a dance almost, right, to be able to balance that so that you're able to reach out to both, right?
Yeah, I think early on there was more resistance than there is now, because typically, you talked about the knee-jerk reaction to those snap moments, and it's faster and simpler just to whack them all and kick them out the road, and kick them out the door. It takes a lot more time and effort to look broader and deeper for those nuanced type of things and look for this, as I said earlier, this complex web of causes that are driving the behaviors that gave you the outcomes that you got. And so it takes time to do that. And that time takes money, and it might implicate the manager, might implicate other things within the organization that the manager now has to fix. It's a whole lot easier to whack the person and send them packing. But they're starting to roll around and realize, this is a better way. I had a number of managers say, this takes too long. And my response was, well, if you got in trouble, wouldn't you want your boss and your HR department to take their time to understand you and why what you did made sense to you at that moment and that point in time, what you saw based on what you experienced? Wouldn't you want them to kind of take that all into consideration if your job's on the line? Or would you rather them be really quick and send you packing out the door right away? Yeah, you're right. I want them to take their time and think about it. So it's that kind of a change of thinking. Yeah, you're right. I would want them to really understand me. So one of the key things that we share with managers is that this influencer model helps us understand the full context of the situation. Context doesn't necessarily justify someone's behavior, but it helps you understand how they got there, how it somehow made sense to them. Helps you understand how they viewed the world at that time. It helps you understand what they saw, what they recognized, what they believed versus what they didn't see, what they didn't recognize, what they didn't believe was actually possible. It helps you kind of walk in their shoes a while to understand, so that's why. Because here's the biggest challenge would be if they don't take the time to understand how it made sense to this person when they did the thing to the thing and this bad outcome happened. All they do is send them packing and bring someone else new in. It's like the same situations and circumstances that kind of align for the first person will rear the head again. Boom, second person, you got to pack, got to go, see you later. And so this really helps to get to the heart of what's driving these behaviors and these outcomes.
Well, I mean, as you refer to it as the whack-a-mole approach, it doesn't solve the long-term systemic problem that's happening there. All you're doing is waiting for the next individual to follow the same bad path.
Yeah. And what if you're going to find some person that you decide that they're guilty? You know, they didn't care enough, they didn't try hard enough, they would have just cared more, things like that. This wouldn't have happened. But then what this also causes us to do is to look at the cultural norms, look at the normative behaviors in his or her operating group. It's possible that this person is doing exactly what everyone else is doing. They just happen to get, in words, caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And so if this person is doing simply what everyone else is doing in the organization, irrespective of whether it's right or wrong, how can you hold this person up as the single failure? How can you hold this person up as a bad example to learn from? That ain't fair. You got a nastier, gnarlier thing. You got to look at these cultural norms. And so that now becomes more of an implication of the manager. How did they allow these aberrant behaviors or whatever to become normative in their whole group? So that, we pulled that string too. Right. So you say, well, why didn't the manager hold them responsible? Then we have to find out why did it make sense for the manager to do what they do, or why did it make sense for the manager to not do what they didn't do? And so we apply the same model to the manager and everyone else that is involved. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Well, I mean, this ends up being a paradigm shift, doesn't it, though, for many organizations? Because, what you described as the whack-a-mole approach, I think maybe is the case in, quite a few companies around the world.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that Brian and I do is when we're teaching the class, we usually make a point to say to any of the students, and sometimes they're managers, sometimes they're other ES&H professionals, they're coming to us from all over the laboratory. They're research scientists, and we say, if you've got we usually have them bring a case study to the class so they can work through it, and that's what we'll do with the PDC. But we say, if you've got something that you want to just run past Brian or I, just to have a second opinion before you move forward, please do. And I will tell you, I've gotten a few phone calls from managers that, kind of were like, they were in like shocked mode with what was happening to them. And just even having a chance to sort of sort that out and not bring that to the other person. Even we sometimes, one of our directors called it, act as second day Matt instead of how you're first reacting to it, to the person. So I have found that to be valuable. They can just call us. It doesn't happen all that often, but they do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, we tell managers to now's the time, especially new managers, now's the time to practice and perfect your "I'm not shocked" face.
Right.
Because if they blow gas, eyes bulging out, your hair
Right.
on fire, when someone brings bad news to them, that person will never tell them anything.
Right.
And the stories that'll be told throughout the whole department about that manager acting poorly will kill reporting. And so they'll be flying, as a manager, they'll be flying blind because they won't have a clue as far as what's going on.
Yeah, certainly you don't motivate somebody to bring it forward if your reaction is like totally over the top.
Yeah. It's
Interesting.
pretty interesting. One thing I'd like to weigh in is that this is all empirically based. It's not like someone woke up at Holiday Inn Express and decided to write a book one day on influence. I had a number of these authors, different people that looked at. So Dr. Mimi Silbert, she's fighting recidivism in the prison system there in California. Crazy successful, looking at Delancey Street, what she does, like a 94% success rate in getting these people to turn their lives around. These are people with multiple felonies on their resume. They turn their lives around for good. Or Dr. Donald Hopkins, he was helped to drive out to annihilate the guinea worm disease that just bothered the people in West Asia and sub-Saharan Africa for thousands of years. Or Dr. Wiwat Rojana Thaikorn used this same model for combating the spread of AIDS in Thailand. And so this is all empirically based. And that's why it works, because the authors of the influencer book and the course, they did a massive global benchmarking research project to find out, gee whiz, what's the secret of the success of these huge successful influencers, and just packed in this book and in this course.
Okay, a good example of influence. I did. I'm also a causal analyst here, and we had an event at a remote location. It was a wind turbine location, and it was an electrical shock. And fortunately, the person was fine, but it gave us the opportunity to figure out what was breaking down, what led to that. It wasn't just his fault, and so I used that as I used the influencer model to realize that we just were not providing this remote site with ES&H expertise, so that they would know how to handle all the systems that they had on that wind turbine from a safety standpoint. And so it was very successful. And I know that operation is still in that mode where they're much better than they were several years ago. And I think the wrong way of handling it, and I can think about early in my career as an industrial hygienist, going into management and just, like almost bowling them over with the industrial hygiene report and the data and all of that. And here's what you have to do. And their eyes are just glazing over. Oh, I have to invest, I don't know, $100,000 into a new ventilation system. There's a different way to sell that. And that's what this influencer course can help with.
Yeah, I'll call it a bad reaction. I'll call it a bad reaction by a manager, like, what are you doing? Why'd you do this? Or like your mom would do with the hands on his. What were you thinking? Right? That we all knew the crud. Yeah, it's a matter of just ridiculing them or chastising them on the spot and break up their flamethrower and just crush their spirit, crush their soul. I can't believe you made me look bad. Or now look what you've done. You've made a whole department look bad. What were you thinking? Oh my God, what have you done? What have you done? And it's just this guilt trip, this massive guilt trip that just, again, demotivates anybody to bring them any news whatsoever. So it shuts down communication. It shuts down that psychological safety in that work group. And the work group then suffers because the way so that's the way it is. Okay, I guess just keep my head down, my elbow to my shoulder to the grindstone, mind my own business, call it a day.
CJ, Brian, thanks so very much for joining us today. Want to again do a shout out to your upcoming PDC, your professional development course at the AIHCE Expo 2023 in Phoenix, Arizona. That event runs from May 22nd to May 24th this year, and hopefully we'll see everyone there at this presentation. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bob.